Anyway,
Let everybody in. I'll do a quick intro and then hand over to Julie. Well, happy Friday, everybody. I'm Sam Osborne, Education Coordinator from SEA Vic. Welcome to Vodcast Committee Conversations for the 2nd of August, 2024. Today's topic is the new 4-stream system for waste recycling. And we've got Julie McLean, immediate past president of SEA Vic. Oh, I should say board director of SEA Vic. We also have our usual guest panel speakers, Catherine Lezer and David Hamilton. We also welcome a guest speaker, Nina Larson from Reground. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to hand it over to you, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, and welcome everybody. And thanks for tuning in again for another one of our vodcasts. We thought that we would talk about waste management because it's timely. The Victorian government currently has a consultation paper out for introducing and streamlining 4 streams of waste, but also, more importantly, to roll it out right across the state so that we have consistency, number one, on the colour of our bins, which is important. If you've been in many different councils, you'll have experienced different lid colours, for example. So getting those all to the one would be good. And then, of course, depending on how advanced any of those councils are, I go to the Surf Coast and they've already rolled out FOGO and glass bins and, so there's a multitude of different coloured bins down there. And then I go somewhere else and find there's only 2 bins and you're not really sure what they're for. So there is a lot of confusion really out there for everybody. And of course, this we talk about households, that it's rolling out to households, but we know that strata is included in that, whether we're talking about villas and townhouses, or walk-up blocks versus where David, is in a multi-level tower building, high-rise building. Everybody generates waste that has to be dealt with. Within the system, it tends to happen where you are either in a council collection service, so you have a service already that you pay for in your rates, that they come on the curbside. They call that a curbside collection. Even if you're in a basement building, they still call that curbside. And that's what they're talking about, is that for streamline pickup service for that. Alternatively, council may have said, we can't cope with that many bins in a multi-storey development or a multi-unit development, and therefore we want you to enter into a private waste collection where you set up your own area to store your bins and you get a contractor to come and pick it up from there. So we've got 2 different things that happen, and up until now, there've been sort of 2 different standards. So when the private waste collector comes and picks it up, he, she, whatever the company, works with the local transfer centre, wherever that is for that area. That transfer centre has its own standards about what they can take or not take. And I know one contractor said he'd love to be offering FOGO, for example, but where he goes, they don't have a FOGO service, so he can't offer that to his clients. And so we've got this sort of difference between what private waste contractors are doing. But one thing is clear, that when they go now to their transfer centre, if their load is contaminated, they are penalised because they can no longer drop it at the rate of recycle, commingle, whatever it was that was in their truck. They now have to drop it as waste, and that is a higher cost. So what we're seeing flow on now is our private waste contractors are now, if you like, fining or charging additional fees back, so additional to the budget, additional fees back to our buildings for management of this waste. So whether we're in the council system or whether we're in the private waste system, waste is our new issue that we need to talk about. So Nina in particular, our usual panel members with Catherine and David, already both living and experience and being part of the committee in a high-rise building. Nina comes to us from Reground, who has extensive experience in working on what this is, which is change management, and it is behaviour related. So it's not regulation rated, and it's not, you know, maybe money is part of the behaviour change. I don't know. We'll explore that. But Nina's got some of that experience about how do you bring about people to change in a very short period of time, because we aren't starting with the preschool change like we did with recycling. So fantastic. Thank you all for coming back. And so my first question then goes across to Nina. Apartments worldwide have lower rates than standalone houses. This is factual data. Are apartment blocks the biggest challenge? And do we have any data that suggests why it is such a challenge?
This is an amazing conversation. I will say, to your point, Julie, about waste being an issue, I'd say let's reframe it. Waste is now the golden opportunity that we can all try to engage in and have some fun around. You're right, apartment buildings have some issues in relation to diversion rates, so recycling rates and contamination. Whether the data is suggesting that it's like because of the building itself, or if it's actually how many bins we have in these contexts, or how we have traditionally or historically engaged with the communities that live in these buildings so they actually understand how to use the bins, that's not entirely clear in the data. We have seen really successful outcomes in apartment buildings in relation to recycling rates when they are engaged, when their apartments have been set up to match, like their internal bin system is set up to match the external bin system in the bin rooms, for example. When I think apartments have been tricky because you have one or two people that are contaminating the bins, and maybe you feel that the whole waste then has to go to landfill. It's a little bit more complicated and complex, and that's, I just think apartment buildings is just like under explored, to be honest, and our contractors don't really know how to give the right information back up to facility managers or residents even. So it's just a new space we're exploring. So yeah, there's definitely issues, and then there's also lots of opportunities.
Thank you. Now, with the where you're saying that the good design then matches, you know, the outcome within the building, Sustainability Victoria developed what is a good design guide for waste management, which includes 4 separate chutes, one for each colour, which would then ideally empty into a bin that matched that colour. In practice, I haven't yet seen one that's gone in with 4 chutes. In practice, what we tend to see is 1 chute with two openings and a flap that runs between the two, that you select which one you want to put it down. So David, my question across to you, how does that chute management working in your building?
Well, the chute management is a significant issue, right? Firstly, it just down to the size of the packages that people put in them, but we don't have a streaming at the chute level, right? So there is no, and the majority of buildings that will have been built in the last 30 years with a chute do not have a single chute. And so streaming for us occurs in a basement garbage room, or more to the point, it starts in the apartment where the owner has to set up a way of streaming in their apartment. And then it's just basically two streams. For most people have only selected 2 streams. That is, It's either recyclable or general waste. And included in general waste is FOGO. And the recycling then, so when you take the recycling component, it then goes into personal selection of streaming in the bin room. And it is a very rough and ready process. There is no streaming of glass or plastic and paper. And there's no washing out and removal of lids and all the things the glass people want. The paper and plastic people don't want glass in it. So it is a very difficult problem. And the issue that I think we face is that government and regulators have not thought through how are you going to make this change. There is no thought to the public policy and the education. There's a lot of thought about the regulation, but very little about the education and the engineering changes that are going to be required. Whether it is, how do you process FOGO in a basement? How do you, but even if you get people to stream it in their apartment, what do they do when they have a small kitchen? How do they have that? And Catherine might have better ideas about that than me, but all I can say is at present in Victoria, we have a regulatory change coming through, but in that whole regulatory package, there are 4 words about multi-unit dwellings. And then it says, e.g. caravan parks. That's the sum total of thought that has gone into the regulatory change.
Catherine, so you've been across multiple strata buildings of different sizes as well.
Yes.
What's been your waste management experience, and in particular that streaming idea? Because commingle has been around for a while, and maybe in the smaller blocks they do manage it actually a bit better than our high-rise buildings for those very reasons that David said, because they may not have chutes for a start, so people have to walk their stuff down.
Yeah, I'm in a building with a chute. At the moment, the chute's down because somebody stuffed pillows down there and nobody can use it, right? So I think the first point, and I've said this so many times on this podcast, is that we've got to get people when they first move into the building and induct them into how we do things around here. Don't put pillows down the chute. Just make sure everything's wrapped properly. If you don't know how to do it, here it is. So, my building has got 1 chute, everything goes down the chute, including pillows, and then nobody knows what happens after that. And it is a rare person that walks their recycling all the way down to the recycling room. But I have got, I like to be positive. So we have some good positive examples to share. So one of the better buildings I lived in, the Strata Council decided, right, we're going to be really good on this recycling. And to influence behaviour, they actually went to Bunnings and they bought a really good sized bucket that would fit under people's sinks in the kitchen with handles, and labelled it recycling and put the special sticker on the side which showed all the things that can be recycled. So we in that building, we handed them out for free to everybody. And that was to encourage people to put their recycling in an easy to carry bucket and take it to the bin room. In the bin room, we provided things to cut your boxes. We provided a really good, one of our council of owners did a fantastic map of visual representation of things that could be recycled and things that couldn't. So that was just stuck up on the wall, which was fantastic. And we took some room back from the common property and created a second bin room, which was just dedicated for recycling. And, the space for bins is not well thought through at the planning stage either. And I've been on those planning committees where I've said to them, this is not big enough bin room. You might have a room for the chute, but where is all the other stuff going to go? And so it's fine if you've got a chute room, you need a recycling room, and then you might need a FOGO room. They all need to be pretty nice rooms to go into, because if they've got no lighting and they smell funny and whatever, people are not going to go in there. So to encourage good behaviour, you've got to think about those environmental things as well. But I think the biggest issue is behaviour, and then making sure you've got a nice place for people to go. you've got to do both of those things together.
Mm. Nina, so is that with some of the work that you've done, and I note that, you know, you've done some case studies and you've worked with a number of buildings or residents in some shape or form. What's some tips around that behaviour management or ideas, just like Catherine said, that they rolled out and tried in their block and worked? What other sorts of ideas have you found that would potentially work for this group?
Yes. So Reground, we've done work with more than 150 buildings. We've been doing waste audits, and we've seen it all. And I'm so glad you're bringing up chutes. It's definitely the issue in these apartment buildings is starting from the very top, how the building is designed in the first place. And if we have a lot of really like impossible to change, like small bin rooms or chute systems, like we're retrofitting and we're just kind of like moving with the building in the pace it can move, and then it becomes almost entirely about behavior. So I want to stress, like, the best buildings we work with are the ones that have been designed well, with, as to David's point, with some of this education and engineering perspectives included in the design. I will say, like, actually on the behavior part, so when we do waste, it's a habit we do every single day. So if you have a chute and you have a landfill chute, then that's going to be the easiest thing for you to do. Like, it's the path of least resistance. So buildings with chutes will struggle to really firmly step into the circular economy and see really strong resource recovery rates. Where we've seen some really successful outcomes are in the buildings where we don't have chutes, where we have decent sized bin rooms, and where we will work with a committee that will have a couple of residents that are really engaged, that we can then support, because a lot of it is people that are on a sustainability committee aren't necessarily experts in waste. So our role is then supporting them in giving them the right education that they can distribute to the building, and then it becomes like a partnership. We had one building in Fitzroy here in Melbourne where we had the mayor come and launch the bin room, and it was really fun. They have 8 streams. Actually, we can see some excellent outcomes in apartment buildings with 8+ recycling streams. And I can share some of that data that we have, some of those case studies that we have, because we can actually, if we get the culture right and that education piece right, we can have a little bit of fun. In this building, for example, they had an Airbnb review. Someone had rented out their apartment, and the review from these people that had stayed in this apartment said the highlight of the building was the bin room. So it can be the fun, but it requires this collaboration. And I think, our waste contractors don't care enough to kind of feed back the right data, the right information to really do that, like, seamless, positive engagement. And the onus then becomes just on residents to do the right thing. But even that, like, as the regulations are different from council to council, from state to state. So yeah, it's a complex thing, but it requires a bit of care, I think.
Do you think that penalties, as in dollars now, is an effective stick? Is that, have you seen where price, like changes of in this case increased costs, that could be reduced if good recycling occurred? So on the basis that the private waste collector is now charging if it's contaminated, I'm sure council will be on the same, because I heard their hoppers all got cameras on them. They scan it as it goes through. They know when it's contaminated, and you get a note. I noticed on the curbside, you already get a note on your bin to say this bin was contaminated. And some, they just put it straight back down and don't take it. So do you think that is one of the mechanisms for driving a change behaviour?
What I know from speaking to a lot of people on committees is that no one wants to pay a large waste bill, and so we want to drive prices down. But I don't know if it's enough to sort of directly change people's behavior. I think it's interesting that we're seeing waste contractors fining for contamination. And I know in Victoria, next financial year, the landfill levy is going to jump by 25%. So that could be maybe their response to, exactly. That could be why, because they don't want to pay extra for taking heavily contaminated recycling as well as landfill to landfill. I think, unfortunately, waste contractors, their only language is money, and it's not enough. Like, we have to kind of humanize waste and make it a little bit more interesting to talk about. Look, the thing is, if you have like most of your waste going to recycling, it's going to be the cheaper option. Like, cardboard and paper recycling stream is almost like $4 per pickup. Like, it's way cheaper than even the mixed recycling stream. So it pays to get these streams right. And I think that can be a part of the conversation. But no, I don't think a stick will work in this piece long term. No.
So David was earlier talking about a dehydration trial that a City of Melbourne are currently doing. And dehydration is one of those circular economy kind of ideas that everything, comes and is consumed and done. With the circular economy working, if it was working from, go to woe for an owner's corporation within its own building, etc., is there anything coming back to the OC in terms of a financial benefit? Like, so if it has its dehydrated compost basically at the end of the day, that's got to go somewhere, and someone is then going to make money at it. Someone else is going to benefit from that. Is the idea of circular economy that something comes back out of this stream, or is it that we are all part of it, but we don't actually benefit from it other than a feel-good moment?
Who is this question for, Julie?
Well, anyone who'd like to think about that, but I was thinking more, Nina, because you're probably across how all of the circular economy works in terms of all of those processes and how, we're part of the supply chain, if you like. But
absolutely. I have a thing to say about dehydrators. I am yet to see them being really utilized to the highest, like where you can see those really strong outcomes, and maybe when there will be a financial benefit. We know they cost a lot of money to run, so there's a cost in the running of the machine. And as you say, there is no other benefit to OCs or residents right now. Also, sometimes these machines will sit and be completely not utilized at all because either something happened to the machine, or it's really hard to manage from a resident perspective if there's no like one person that's in charge of it. I think it's a really interesting, and I don't know, maybe David can speak to if your building has a dehydrator, but it really depends on the engagement amongst residents. We work with one building in City of Melbourne actually that's very, very happy with theirs, but I would say they're an outlier. So they have decided that they wanted to use it.
Yeah, so I think I was reflecting that the City of Melbourne has been running a trial and part of the city in high rise to do better streaming, and that trial is still ongoing, and all of a sudden they're going to get hit with a regulatory change before the trial in the area of the state that has the highest concentration of high-rise buildings has been able to work out what the solution might be. So that's part of the public policy problem. But I want to ask Catherine, because Catherine's got two hats. She's a Perth City Councillor, because I've talked to the City of Melbourne where their thinking's going, because they've got the problem. But Catherine, you are a councillor that is in a large council which has high rise, and what's the thinking in Perth?
Yeah, there's two thinking. So we've had statutory state-based targets for a long time about recycling and so on. And so we've got targets for 2025 that every council is going to miss, but we've got targets for 2030 that people are hopeful of hitting. And one of the things that they've done in City of Perth is they want to do FOGO. They want to roll FOGO out, but there's no one to take the FOGO at the end of the day. That's our problem here. We haven't got the factories. We haven't got the places to manage the FOGO. So they're delaying that start. The council here has, obviously they've had they've had the normal household waste, and then they've had commingled recycling for a long time. They are doing audits and putting, notes on people's bins when they don't do the right thing, or sometimes they refuse to take it if it's really badly contaminated. But the city is hoping they've just moved away from putting everything into landfill to contracting waste to energy contractor. And so one of the fortunate things is that if you do have a lot of contamination, it doesn't matter as much because it's just going to go straight to energy. So that's a sort of a way of leapfrogging some of this idea. But it's a constant problem. It's behaviour. It's the bin rooms aren't big enough. It's the bin trucks aren't the right size. There's 1,000 things that go wrong. And then at the end of the day, even if you've got all that right, you've got to have a place to dispose it. And that's WA's problem at the moment. Yeah.
So Nina, I'd ask you, in both Sweden and to some extent in the UK, they've definitely gone down the waste to energy route, which in a sense does create a circular economy and does provide, there is the energy, there's a market for the energy that's produced, which is a quantifiable market that somebody can put $1 in to invest in the plant. So I'm just asking you, as a policy alternative, is that a viable policy alternative that should be pursued by
I would say no. I'm actually heading to Denmark tonight, and where I'm from, and we in Denmark are moving away. We don't have enough resources to run our waste to energy plants anymore. That's why we're talking about importing waste from other countries. It's not aligned with circular economy principles. It's not using resources at its highest value. I think Australia is doing a bit, it's happening here in Victoria as well, by the way, that we are implementing this solution that some of our most progressive countries in Europe are very fast moving away from, because waste to energy plants in itself have its own issues that we don't really speak about that much. But also because when you start to really get this behavior right, then you actually will end up with an understanding and respecting that all of the material that is in our waste stream is a resource and can be used for economic development, can be a new product, can be something good. And I think waste to energy it requires a lot of investment, and I was hoping that instead we could invest that into actually engaging with where this issue comes from, which is behavior. And also, but no one wants to do behavioral education. When I go to the Waste Expo every time, it's just like new technology. No one talks about the problem, which is human behavior. So I think going off the policy, obviously in Copenhagen, for example, the waste to energy plants also the energy is used for heating people's homes. That's also not a system that we have here in Australia. We can't retrofit that. So I don't know. I think it's going to benefit some corporations, and then it's going to be a problem we have to address down the track. So yeah, I do think we are sitting with the sort of the harder issue to solve, but I think that's where the magic is going to happen when we get sort of all of the components right.
So
I think we're all saying the same thing though. It's behaviour change up front. And if we were inducting everybody into our buildings, and part of the induction process was how to recycle, how to use the bin chute properly, how to do your FOGO, all that kind of stuff, how to compost even, that's the behaviour change that's missing. And we talk about it every time. We need to induct people properly when they move into a strata. That's the fundamental thing. Yeah.
So one of the Victorian regulations actually are designed, so we had a 2030 transition, well, drop dead date to transition by, and they're actually bringing that back by anything up to from 3 to 5 years, right? So, but the behavioural change in the education program, if we take it from other areas like road safety or whatever, they are not, 1 year, 2 year type transitional changes in people's behaviour and thinking. And there is a real dearth of resource and thinking and materials being developed to go alongside the regulatory change, right? So that's what concerns me as a person living in strata, that I'm going to get a finger pointed at me and I feel like I'm just a victim, which people are not helping the transition. So that I think is the real public policy dilemma. And for an owners corporation committee, a real dilemma as well, because they will be pointed at and people will complain to them about, why do I need to do this? So I think that's a thing that we all are going to need some help with, Nina.
And that's a great segue, David, because Nina, my last question, because we need to wrap up, is about reground. Now, you mentioned you do these waste audits. Could you just take us through a little bit about what a waste audit is and how that would then benefit a committee in moving forward on this issue? If they proactively want to try and curb, that maybe they're getting, lots of increased costs as a result, sort of thing, and they want to take a first step of going, how do I change this? Can you just take us through that process?
Yes. So the waste audits that we've done in apartment buildings have been mostly in collaborations with councils and the state government here in Victoria. It's really to get an understanding, because it's so new, this, like, just exploring this issue. So for us, we look through bins and pick out everything to understand what ends up in the landfill stream, what goes into recycling, to really answer some larger questions, like, is it easy enough for us to install FOGO bins in apartment buildings, let's say, or what other recycling streams can we implement? I would say that we Reground haven't ever really been able to help apartment buildings other than with the education and with the support to the OCs, but now we've actually created a bit of a service. It's called Circular Systems, and that is in response to this lack of good contractors out there. Because if you ask me, what's the hole in the whole piece, it's like the waste contractors. They have power, they could help residents as well. It could be a very fun dialogue. So we don't collect anything, but we put together a consortium of the best operators that actually will give data back to residents to empower them. And then we help with the education. So I think I would think, and to David's point, this is not about individuals. Like, no one person can change this whole system. This is like really system change. And I think people living in apartment buildings are just experiencing this system not really working, more than people living in households, single dwellings. So yeah, there's a lot to do, and together we can absolutely get there, I think.
And thank you for that. One quick question. About 4 or 5 years ago, I read an article from Milan, actually, that was about waste, and what caught my eye was that they actually had found, they sealed the chutes, that they found that from an education perspective was a lot better for people to physically and visibly see where and what they were doing. Is that something that you've recommended as part of one of your audits? I mean, maybe it wouldn't work for a really tall building, but for others, do you recommend that?
100%. I am talking to, and in the SV, so Sustainability Victoria's guidelines for apartment buildings, it's a suggestion to put in chutes. We have done so much work with buildings, even tall buildings without chutes, and no one says, I wish I had a chute. Absolutely, blocking up chutes would be a really great first step, really, because it's just lazy behavior. And again, you can create community if you have fun bin rooms that are decent sized, to Catherine's point. So yeah, that is definitely one of our recommendations.
Interesting. Well, as usual, I think we could, have another whole conversation about this. It's rather interesting stuff. Any other quick comments from our panel members, David, Catherine?
I think the bin room comment, don't underestimate making a bin room look, have the good lighting, have the implements there that people need to use, the cutting tools and whatever else. And, I think you can't underestimate, if it's nice to go in there, people will do it. It's not an impediment for people to not do it. So I think that's really important.
I think that's a very good point. Very good point. David?
Well, I think Catherine has summed up. I mean, and Nina, this is a significant behavioural change that you are asking people to undergo. In other words, there's the convenience factor. I can just drop something down there. I live in a building which had European designed kitchens, and when we moved in, the European designed kitchens had two very small bins in the kitchen to put waste in, to stream it. The first thing that appeared in the general waste downstairs was all of these bins were taken out as owners moved in, and they threw them in. This is 12 years ago. They threw them out because they wanted to have a bigger bin so they could store more apartment to have fewer trips to the rubbish room or fewer trips to the chute. So, we are going to, it's back to the future, I'm afraid, for us.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you very much, Nina, for joining us today. Thank you, David. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to our audience as well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
It makes sense to her.
Thank you, everybody. This has been recorded, and I'll send everyone a copy. And also just a little promotion for some SCA sustainability events free for lot owners. You can check in the chat box for the link: electrification and EV retrofitting in strata. And David Hamilton will be presenting that. That is on the 8th of August, 6:30 p.m. to 7:30. And also you can register for the next month's vodcast. There's another link in the chat box there. And of course, the SCA Vic Owners Info website is available there. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you later.